I appreciate taking a moment to wait while Councillor Callard got with us. And if you've got water or anything, Ben?
I'm fine.
You're fine?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get started. I'm absolutely delighted to say we have no apologies for absence because Councillor Grocott Martin can join us. Welcome back, Martin. We're really pleased to have you here. So I believe from your wife, you're on strict instructions not to say anything while you're with us so that you get better. Do we have any declarations of interest? Then I'd like to move on to item 3, which is the 2023-24 Revenue and Capital Budget Month 9 update. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Leader. Today I'm presenting the 2023-24 Revenue and Capital Budget Month 9 update. The purpose of this report is to provide Cabinet with an update of the progress of the Council's revenue budget, the 2023-2024 financial year, based on actual expenditure incurred at the end of month 9, which is December. And this is overlaid with the most up-to-date budget information up until the time of publishing. There are a number of key issues in the report, and these can be summarised as follows. A slight deterioration in the overall revenue budget forecast of £29,000, comprising additional cost pressures identified within core service delivery directorates of £685,000, offset by favourable movements in treasury costs, final pay award costs being less than previously forecast, and the pensions costs relating to service redesign now being able to be met from existing capitalisation direction budgets. The assumption for further unbudgeted grant income has now been removed from the forecast, given the short period of time through to year end and in light of continuing pressures on Welsh Government budgets. A significant movement in cumulative school balances is forecast for the year, moving from surplus of £4.25 million to a forecast deficit of £1.35 million at year end. 16 schools are currently forecast to be in deficit by year end. Remaining service risks and variables through to the end of the year are the continuing high levels and complexity of demand for social care, the level of homelessness presentations, and the level of any additional unbudgeted grant awards and the subsequent ability for further core council expenditure to be met from this. The risk highlighted at month 6 relating to the potential deficit in funding for universal free school meals is now removed, following recent notification of further funding that meets the ongoing costs of rollout to all schools. An overall underspend on the capital programme of £3.5 million, which results in £815,000 of usable funding that is released to assist in meeting forward capital pressures. The remaining £2.7 million relates to specific scheme financing by way of borrowing and grant that is not available for future use. This report has 5 recommendations for Cabinet today. Firstly, that Cabinet note the overall revenue budget deficit forecast at month 9 of £314,000, a slight deterioration of £29,000 since the previous forecast. That Cabinet note the forecast 85% delivery of the £12.3 million required service savings for the year, resulting in a £1.86 million deficit that is needing to be managed as part of the overall revenue budget. The overall level of required savings includes the additional in-year budget recovery measures of £2.1 million instigated at month 5. The Cabinet note the budgetary risks included within the forecast, namely the volatility of demand for high-cost services, particularly in adults and children's social care and homelessness, the risk of further non-delivery of the £12.3 million of budgeted savings targets through to year end, the limited reserve cover available to the Council to cover any further deterioration in outturn position. The Cabinet note the forecast draw of £5.6 million on schools' delegated budgets, as outlined in Appendix 1 of this report, an increased draw of £1.85 million since the previous forecast. Cumulative school balances are forecast to move into a deficit of £1.35 million by the end of the financial year, with 16 schools now forecast to be in a deficit balance. And finally, the Cabinet note an overall forecast capital budget underspend of £3.5 million, alongside an indication of slippage in capital schemes of £11.9 million. This consequently introduces £815,000 of usable capital funding that can assist in meeting forward capital pressures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. Is there anyone from Cabinet who'd like to come in before I call on councillors from the opposition? Thank you, councillors. Councillor John, you have two questions which I think we'll take together.
Okay, thank you, Leader, and Councillor Callard, thank you for the update, but it doesn't really feel like much of an update because, of course, we're hours away from the start of March, and this is setting out the position as of December last year. So can you explain why we're getting updates almost 3 months in arrears, please?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. I'd question 3 months, since it's nearly 2 months rather than 3. 3 would be the end of March, not the beginning of March. And you'll appreciate that it takes time for this data to come forward and be developed. And also that we're keen in this cycle that this update is provided to performance and overview scrutiny as timely as possible, which means that this data was actually published, I'm going to say, 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So I don't think your characterisation of this data being 3 months out of date is particularly accurate.
Okay, I note your response. Thank you. My next question is, under previous administrations, Monmouthshire had a policy of investing all capital receipts in education. That's helped us deliver new schools across the county that children are benefiting from. Isn't it the case now that the administration has run down reserves to a position where they can no longer be used for organisational change? So instead, you're using capital receipts to facilitate organisational change, and children and young people are going to lose out because of that failure to manage your budgets in year.
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. Insofar as the Council's capital programme is concerned, the Council has access to a range of sources of funding and financing beyond capital receipts. The Council's capital programme is significantly funding by specific grant funding, with wider recourse to borrowing where appropriate. Cabinet's responded well to the in-year financial challenges that have presented in both 2022 to 23 and in the current financial year. It's also approved a budget planning framework at its meeting in November to inform its budget process for the coming financial year. Both of these ensure that considered and careful use of reserves and capital receipts is undertaken. The administration has not reneged in any way on its ongoing commitment to modernise the school estate, and I think the construction of the new 3 to 19 school in Abergavenny is a testament to that, it being the first net zero carbon school in Wales. And there are, other examples where we're also investing in education in Monmouthshire, so I'm not sure that's a fair comment. Thank you.
You're pausing there, Councillor John. I'll move.
It's 2 questions.
Oh, I'm happy to come back, but
you usually.
Those are my 2 questions.
I was waiting for the thanks. Councillor...
I'll thank Councillor Callard at the end. I've got some more questions on his next item, but I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, you have a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Sorry, I'm slightly on the move, so bear with me. Apologies. Yes, the month 9 update shows that there's around just over 1.8 million variance in service savings proposals. With such limited usable reserve cover, how do you propose to manage any further deterioration in the outturn position? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. The overspend against services has been reported since Cabinet first brought forward an early forecast and assessment of in-year budgetary risks in July. Budget monitoring and financial management arrangements have since been strengthened and a budget recovery plan implemented with a range of measures introduced. The introduction of the Financial Management Board now maintains ongoing oversight and provides ongoing update and advice to both Cabinet and the Strategic Leadership Team. As reported in month 9, we've seen some further slight deterioration, but this is offset by outperformance in corporate and Treasury budgets. The budgetary risk in respect of further unbudgeted one-off specific grant being received has been removed from the updated forecast, and Cabinet is confident in the arrangements in place and will react and respond accordingly, even at this late stage of the financial year, to ensure that Council has no further recourse to reserve usage at year end. We remain confident, based on latest information, that this will be achieved.
Thank you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you.
Cabinet, Councillor Callard took us through in detail the recommendations, so I'm not going to repeat them. There are 5, all of which ask us to note the current situation and what we're doing about them. Are we agreed, Cabinet? We are, Nick. Did note that. We can move on to item 4, the revenue and capital budget for 24-25. And this, as you'll know, Cabinet, the final proposals that will go to Council tomorrow following scrutiny and public consultation. So over to you again, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. You'll remember that when I presented the draft budget proposals to Cabinet in January, laying out our proposals for the next financial year, it was in the context of our funding not matching the increases in costs and demand for our services. Between then and now, we have had some additional cost pressures come forward, but we've also seen some opportunities to improve our funding. For the last 4 weeks, we've been consulting on our proposals, and I'm pleased to say that this budget consultation has been the most successful to date. We've spoken to many different specific interest groups, as well as members of the public, and we have received valuable feedback that has helped us to shape this budget. And I'd like to thank those that took the time to provide the feedback to us. The main changes to the budget from the draft proposals are that we will go further on our increase in education spending. So the expected Teachers' Pay Award will be fully funded. We will continue to provide food waste bags free of charge to ensure that we maintain our excellent recycling rates. And we'll also put aside some money to support the maintenance of our roads and improve road safety. Leader, the budget has a number of recommendations, and I'll go through them now, if that's okay. That the Cabinet considers the responses to the consultation and recommends to Council that the 2024-25 revenue budget, as attached in Appendix C, and the 2024-2025 capital budget and indicative 25-26 and 27-28 budgets, as attached in Appendix 1. That a 7.8% increase in the Band D equivalent council tax is applied for county purposes for 2024-2025. Cabinet asks that efforts are maximised to ensure that individuals and households eligible for council tax exemptions or reductions claim the benefit available to them. The Cabinet approves changes to the proposed savings and pressures updated following public consultation, scrutiny, and more up-to-date information being made available since the draft proposals were released on consultation on the 17th of January 2024. The Cabinet approves the proposed changes to the capital programme that include additional highways and infrastructure investment of £1.65 million for 2024-2025. The Cabinet considers the Responsible Financial Officer's report on the robustness of the budget process and adequacy of reserves issued under the provisions of the Local Government Act 2003 and an assessment of the current and future financial risks facing the Council. That the Cabinet adopts the Responsible Financial Officer's report on the prudential indicator calculations for capital financing. And finally, that Cabinet requests that the existing arrangements in place for more regular budget monitoring and scrutiny continue during 2024-2025, with monitoring and reporting of budget savings being strengthened in acknowledgement of the deliverability risk involved, that the financial strategy is now developed, accompanied by a medium-term financial plan that looks to keep the Council on a secure and sustainable path going forward. The timely review is undertaken of the MTFP to ensure it remains up to date, including an assessment of evidence-based pressures and risks, underlying modelling assumptions, and the ongoing affordability implications of the community and corporate plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Callard. Do we have any response from Cabinet members? Not at this stage, I feel. Councillor Taylor, would you like to come in first? Councillor Taylor? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Lisa, I'm just having some issues with my camera, keeping my camera on. There's not enough bandwidth. Can I just ask then, given the lack of reserve cover available next year, how confident are you in achieving your service area savings?
The budget savings proposals and pressures incorporated into these final budget proposals have been rigorously assessed as part of the challenge process through finance teams, strategic leadership teams, and through Cabinet. Any budget is based on an assessment of best estimates, and in that regard, budgetary risks are taken into account when setting the budget, where and when known. The Financial Management Board has a specific focus at this time to review the arrangements now being put in place to ensure that savings proposals are delivered in line with the proposals presented, to the extent that circumstances lead to non-delivery of savings or other circumstances that give us rise to further budget pressures. The now well-established governance arrangements will look to respond in providing advice and options to Cabinet for their consideration, and such as to mitigate and manage any pressures that result.
Thank you. My second question is, what is your rationale for setting a 7.8% council tax increase, an increase of 0.3% on your modelling? Thank you.
Thank you for this question, Councillor Taylor. I think if you remember back to when we published the draft proposal, we had a gap to continue our current services of £21.9 million. Now, we've made a number of changes in our budget in order to bring that gap down in terms of changes we're making to some of the services that we provide. But a balance has to be struck between a reduction in service provision and increase in council tax. And we felt initially at draft budget stage that an increase of 7.5% was justifiable in the level of service provision that it would support. Now, as a result of the consultation, we have brought forward changes to the budget, as I mentioned into my introduction. One of those major changes is fully funding the Teachers' Pay Award. Now, that wasn't possible with the amount of funding that we had, and we considered that it was an important change to make in order to support our schools in what has been and continues to be a difficult time from them coming off the back of the COVID pandemic. And that was the rationale from going from a 7.5% council tax increase to a 7.8% council tax increase. It allowed us to bridge that funding gap.
Thank you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor John, you have some questions.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And Councillor Callard, I note your reference to a successful consultation. I assume that means that more people engaged with it this year than previously. I think that probably says a lot about the controversial nature of some of the proposals in there. Pleased to hear your commitment to working to protect the recycling rates that you inherited from the previous administration. I think it's really important that we try to maintain and even exceed 70%. I didn't hear you welcome the additional money the council's received from UK government, which has enabled the council to reverse the cuts to schools that you wanted to make. Are you now confident that the final proposals are sufficient, that we won't be seeing redundancies in our schools in the next financial year?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. Regards to the additional funding that we received some money from the Welsh Government as a consequential from the UK Government, which is where the majority of our funding comes from. It didn't fully cover the extra money that we sent towards schools, hence the change in the council tax. And in fact, it represented, I think, slightly under 0.25% of our total revenue budget. So I think it's been referred to as a sticking plaster, and I think that's probably an accurate description when we look at the state of local government finances across the UK. Regarding the question about redundancies in our schools, schools are going to see all of their pay-related pressures funded based on the pay assumptions that we have currently modelled. Upon approval of the budget by the council, schools will then have to set their own budgets and understand the consequences of changes that they will need to make. Schools are now also needing to withdraw themselves from the level of investment that have resulted from the use of their accumulated school balances since the pandemic, and where significant one-off funding was provided by Welsh Government. Schools will need to put their finances back on a sustainable footing and such that any structural deficits are addressed through robust recovery plans. And you'll appreciate the consequences of these are yet to be worked through, and they are down to the delegated schools budget. Schools manage their own staffing levels and their own finances.
Okay, thank you. My next question, I'm not sure if this is for Councillor Callard or perhaps one for Councillor Sandals, but as part of the budget proposals, you're proposing a reduction in the opening hours of leisure centres of 22 hours per week across the 4 sites. What have you modelled in terms of the reduction of members of those leisure centres, and what does that mean in terms of a fall in revenue, please?
Yeah,
you ready?
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Councillor John, for that question. The reduction of opening hours is expected to have a limited impact on our income because pay-as-you-go usage is extremely limited during the proposed closure times. We look to continue to grow our direct debit memberships to maximise the potential of the service, and of course, the new proposed opening times will also have a positive impact on reducing our energy and operating costs across the 4 sites.
Right. Okay. I would take issue with that because obviously a lot of people who use the leisure centres. So you're referring to the limited numbers of customers between 9 and 10, but obviously not all the people using the leisure centre in those hours will arrive at that time. Many of them will be arriving earlier in the evening. But can you tell me why you're proposing uniform opening hours for the 4 sites when some leisure centres are clearly much busier than others? So for anyone who hasn't seen the usage figures, Monmouth, which of course had a complete refurbishment a few years ago, there are more people using that leisure centre in the evenings than the other 3 sites combined. So why are you proposing uniform opening hours, please?
Okay, and thanks for that question. You are right, of course. It's correct that we see a mixed level of activity across the 4 sites, but what does remain consistent in all the sites is that they all see a significant drop-off during the proposed closure period. Therefore, these closures have been proposed to try and provide sustainable services that are easily accessible to all our residents.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I'm sure we'll debate further tomorrow.
I'm sure we will, and I'm sure we all welcome that debate. It's part of the local democracy that's vibrant. Cabinet. Councillor Callard has explained in detail the recommendations that we were asked to consider. for this budget. I would therefore ask you if you are in agreement. Thank you very much. You know, we are. With that, Cabinet, I'll draw a close to this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back.
Lovely to have you back.